Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are diving into something that sounds almost too simple to be a medical breakthrough, yet the science behind it is absolutely revolutionary. We're talking about walking. But, and this is a massive but, we aren't talking about getting your 10,000 steps in whenever you can fit them. No, we are talking about precision timing. We're talking about the glucose window. It turns out when you move matters infinitely more than how hard you move, especially regarding metabolic health. I'm joined today by Dr. Glyko, a metabolic health expert who says we've been looking at exercise all wrong. Doctor, welcome to the show.
It is such a pleasure to be here, and you are exactly right. We tend to view exercise as this bank account where we just need to deposit a certain amount of currency, calories, by the end of the day. But biology doesn't work on a 24-hour banking cycle. It works on immediate biochemical feedback loops. The glucose window I talk about is specifically that critical period right after you eat a meal. Most people eat, sit, and let their blood sugar spike, forcing their pancreas to scream for help. My goal is to show you how a simple 15-minute stroll changes that entire cellular equation.
That is fascinating. You use the phrase forcing the pancreas to scream, which creates such a vivid image. I think most of us assume that if we eat a sandwich, our body just handles it. We don't really think about the internal panic button that might be getting pressed. So let's break this down. I've just finished a bowl of pasta. I'm feeling good, maybe a little sleepy. What is happening inside my bloodstream at that exact moment? And why is sitting on the couch the worst thing I could possibly do right then?
Right, so picture your bloodstream as a highway. You've just dumped a massive fleet of delivery trucks, that's the glucose from the pasta, onto the road all at once. If you are sitting on the couch, the destination for those trucks, your muscles, is effectively closed. The gates are shut. So the traffic builds up in the blood vessels. This is hyperglycemia. Your body senses this traffic jam and realizes it is dangerous because high sugar damages the vessel walls. So the pancreas floods the system with insulin, which is like the traffic police, trying to frantically force the trucks into parking garages, often converting that excess energy directly into fat storage.
Okay, that is a terrifying metaphor because I think we have all felt that traffic jam physically. It's that food coma heaviness. So typically we rely on insulin, the traffic cop, to clear the road. But you're suggesting there is a way to open the gates without relying so heavily on the police. Because from what I understand, relying too much on insulin over years is exactly what leads to resistance and type 2 diabetes, right? We want to give the traffic cops a break.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Insulin resistance is essentially the muscle cells changing the locks because the traffic cops keep banging on the door too often. But here's the magic of the glucose window. Muscle contraction is a completely separate signaling pathway. When you walk, even gently, the mechanical stress of the muscle fibers compressing and expanding sends a different signal deep inside the cell. It bypasses the insulin receptor entirely. It's like having a back door to the garage that opens automatically from the inside whenever the machinery starts running.
Wait, let me make sure I understand this, because this sounds like a cheat code. You are saying that if I am walking, my muscles can pull sugar out of my blood without needing a surge of insulin? That seems huge for anyone trying to manage their weight or their hormones. It sounds almost too good to be true, that the movement itself acts as the key. How does that physically work? Is there a specific mechanism inside the cell that wakes up when we move?
It is absolutely a physiological cheat code. The hero of this story is a transporter protein called GLUT4. Imagine GLUT4 as a little cargo ship that lives deep inside the muscle cell. When you are resting, these ships are docked in the center of the cell, nowhere near the surface. Usually, insulin triggers a complex chemical relay race to tell these ships to move to the cell membrane to pick up glucose. But, and here's the kicker, calcium release and cellular energy turnover from simple muscle contraction also tell GLUT4 to move to the surface. No insulin required. You walk, GLUT4 rises, glucose enters. Simple as that.
I love that image of the cargo ships rising to the surface. It really visualizes why this sedentary state is so problematic. The ships are just stuck in the harbor. Now, I want to talk about the comparison we teased at the beginning. You've argued that a 15-minute walk right after a meal is actually better for blood sugar control than a hardcore 1-hour gym session 4 hours later. That feels counterintuitive. The gym session burns way more calories, doesn't it? Why is the timing winning over the intensity?
This is the time value of glucose. Think about it like this. By the time you get to the gym 4 hours later, the damage is already done. The glucose spike happened 2 hours ago. The insulin surge happened 90 minutes ago. Your body has already struggled through the traffic jam, stressed your blood vessels, and likely stored the excess as fat. You can burn calories later, sure, but you cannot undo the oxidative stress and glycation, which is sugar sticking to proteins, that occurred during that spike. The light walk flattens the curve while it is happening. You are preventing the disaster rather than cleaning up the debris.
That is a profound distinction. Preventing the disaster versus cleaning up the debris. That really changes how I view my evening schedule. So let's get specific on the protocol here. I finish my last bite of dinner. Do I need to lace up my shoes instantly? Do I wait 10 minutes? Is there a specific Goldilocks zone where the GLUT4 transporters are most needed? I imagine if I wait too long, I miss the window.
Great practical question. You don't need to sprint out the door with a fork in your hand. Digestion needs to start. The glucose typically begins hitting the bloodstream in significant amounts about 15 to 30 minutes after you start eating, peaking around 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the meal composition. The sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone, is starting movement about 20 to 30 minutes after your last bite. This catches the rising wave of glucose exactly as it surges, allowing your muscles to sip that fuel right out of the blood before it reaches a dangerous peak.
Okay, 20 to 30 minutes post-meal. That is totally doable. Now let's talk about the what. You keep saying walk, but I know a lot of people listening are high performers. They are thinking, if walking is good, sprinting must be better, or maybe I should do squats until failure. Does intensity help us here, or does it actually complicate things? I've heard high-intensity exercise can sometimes spike blood sugar temporarily. What is the rule of thumb for intensity?
You have to be careful with intensity. If you go too hard, like a heavy sprint or heavy lifting, your body enters a fight-or-flight sympathetic nervous state. This triggers the liver to dump more glucose into the bloodstream because it thinks you are running from a tiger. That is the opposite of what we want right after a meal. We want low to moderate steady-state movement. Walking activates the soleus muscles in the lower legs, which are metabolic powerhouses for glucose clearance, without triggering that stress hormone response. We want flow, not fight.
That is fascinating. The idea that the liver might panic and dump more fuel on the fire if we go too hard. So the glucose window is really about gentleness. It's about signaling to the body that we are active but safe. I want to touch on the vascular aspect you mentioned earlier. You said high sugar damages vessel walls. Is this walking habit just about weight, or are we looking at long-term cardiovascular protection here too?
It is absolutely about vascular longevity. High glucose spikes cause endothelial dysfunction. That's the inner lining of your blood vessels. Think of sugar shards scratching the inside of a pipe. Over time, that scratching creates inflammation, which leads to plaque buildup. By flattening that glucose spike with a walk, you are literally protecting the structural integrity of your arteries. It's not just about fitting into your jeans. It is about keeping your blood vessels smooth, flexible, and responsive for the next 40 years. It is preventative cardiology in its simplest form.
Man, when you put it like that, sugar shards scratching the inside of a pipe, it makes the 15-minute walk seem like the most important part of the meal. It's almost like the digestion isn't finished until the walk is done. I'm curious about the cumulative effect. If I do this 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, that's 45 minutes of walking. Does the benefit stack? Do I become more insulin sensitive over time, even when I'm sleeping?
Yes, the benefits absolutely compound. This is what we call metabolic flexibility. By constantly training your GLUT4 transporters to move to the surface efficiently, and by keeping your baseline insulin levels low because you aren't requiring massive surges after every meal, your cells regain their sensitivity. You are essentially retuning the engine. Over a few months of this habit, your fasting glucose often drops, your inflammation markers go down, and your body becomes much better at switching between burning sugar and burning fat. It is a metabolic reset.
A metabolic reset. I think everyone listening wants that. It's empowering to know that we don't need a pharmaceutical intervention to start that process. We just need gravity and a pair of shoes. Before we wrap up, Dr. Glyco, if you had to give our listeners one visualization to keep in their heads the next time they finish a big meal and eye the couch, what would it be? What is the mental image that gets them out the door?
Think of the glucose in your blood like fresh, wet cement. When it first hits your system, it's manageable. It flows. If you keep it moving, you can use it to build muscle and energy. But if you sit still, it hardens. It stiffens your arteries. It gets stored as stubborn fat, and it gums up the cellular machinery. Your walk is the mixer. It keeps the energy fluid and usable. Don't let the cement harden in your veins. Just 15 minutes is all it takes to keep the system flowing.